The first thing Preston Raines felt when he regained consciousness was cold. Not the kind of cold that made your skin prickle or your breath fog, but something deeper, like it had settled in his bones and decided to stay. He blinked slowly, vision swimming with flickering lights and shifting shadows. A low hum vibrated through the floor beneath him. He was lying on some kind of metallic platform, shirtless, pants damp and clinging to him. A thin mist hung in the air, and drops of water clung to the corners of the curved ceiling. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain stabbed through his ribs. Status: vital signs stable. Core temperature low. Came a voice. It was mechanical but not entirely synthetic. It had a strange cadence, like someone who had learned English from a dictionary and a lot of confidence. Preston squinted toward the source. A tall, slate-colored figure with smooth skin and long limbs stood at the end of the platform, holding a glowing panel. Its large, lidless eyes blinked sideways, then focused back on him. "Hey!" Preston rasped. "Where the hell am I?" The alien tilted its head. "You are in Observation Chamber 6 of the Varellan vessel Qualuan. You were retrieved unconscious from Earth's polar region. Initial hypothesis: exposure to sub-zero water would result in immediate physiological shutdown. You did not freeze solid. You remained viable." "Yeah," Preston coughed. "That'd be because I went ice fishing. Fell through the lake. Happens more than you'd think." The alien blinked again. "You intentionally entered a body of water at negative temperatures?" "No," Preston groaned, trying to swing his legs off the table. "I fell. It wasn't a great plan. But no, we don't instantly turn into human popsicles." The alien stepped forward. "Clarify. You submerged your entire body in a liquid medium below the freezing point of water. You remained conscious for approximately 3 minutes before retrieval. According to Varellan Physiology Index, such conditions would induce instantaneous cellular crystallization." Preston gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, well, we're not Varellan." There was a pause. The figure turned and muttered something into a device on its arm. A moment later, another alien entered, this one shorter and wearing a bandolier filled with vials. "Subject displays high resilience," the second one said. "Possibly genetic anomaly." "No anomaly," Preston said, his voice gaining strength. "Humans do that all the time. Polar plunges, ice baths. We even have competitions. Some guys sit in ice water for over an hour." Both aliens stared at him. The taller one said, "That is recreational?" "Oh yeah," Preston nodded. "Supposed to be good for circulation or something." The two aliens exchanged a long, silent look. "Request permission to replicate the event in controlled conditions," said the shorter one. "Denied," the taller one replied. "Subject must be monitored for post-trauma complications. Core temperature remains below optimal." Preston rolled his shoulders, wincing. "You got a towel or something? Or maybe a heater?" The taller alien approached and waved a device over him. A warm mist sprayed from the nozzle, evaporating the moisture on his skin. Preston sighed in relief. "We have underestimated your species' capacity for thermal endurance," the alien said. "We believed temperatures below 0 Celsius would be lethal." Preston gave a tired grin. "Yeah, well, welcome to Earth." The next few hours were a blur of scans, questions, and what Preston could only describe as very polite poking. They were fascinated by everything: his blood pressure, his ability to shiver, even the way he clenched his fists when cold. They asked him to describe the sensation of submersion in icy water. "It's like your skin burns, but inside your chest tightens up and your brain screams at you to get out. But if you stay calm and keep breathing, you can last a little while." "Fascinating," said the tall one. "You override instinctive panic." "Sometimes," Preston muttered. "Sometimes panic wins." The aliens logged every word. When they finally let him rest, he sat on the edge of the platform, wrapped in a silvery thermal sheet, watching them whisper to each other in their strange, musical language. He didn't know how long he dozed, but he awoke to alarms blaring. "Containment breach in Cryolab 3, a voice announced. Unauthorized biological activity detected. The tall alien, who Preston had learned was called Veluin, sprinted past him with a crew of others. The shorter one, Brala, paused only a moment. "Remain here," Brala said. "Do not follow." "Sure," Preston muttered, watching the door slide shut. He waited 3 seconds, then limped after them. His feet slapped against the cold floor panels as he followed the noise. Pain flared in his ribs, but he gritted his teeth. The corridor turned sharply, then opened into a vast chamber filled with tall, vertical pods. Frost coated everything. One of the pods had shattered glass in shards. A slithering trail of fluid led away from it. Veluin stood by a console, issuing commands in fast, clipped tones. "What happened?" Preston asked. Veluin turned, too focused to protest his presence. An Earth aquatic predator subject 34B was preserved for study. It regained function unexpectedly and escaped containment. Preston's brow furrowed. "What kind of predator?" "Your local designation, freshwater crocodile." "You're kidding. You froze a saltwater croc?" "It was freshwater." "Still, that thing's a tank." From the corner of the room came a growling sound, low and guttural. The croc, half covered in frost, lumbered from behind a cryo chamber. Its eyes locked onto the group. It hissed. "Do not engage," Veluin warned. "It may still be disoriented." Preston grabbed a nearby metal rod from a maintenance rack and stepped forward. "Stop," Brala shouted. "You are unarmed and injured. I'm also the only one here who knows what this thing's about to do." The croc lunged. Preston sidestepped, barely avoiding the snapping jaws, and brought the rod down on its snout. It recoiled, thrashing. He stumbled back, ribs screaming. Veluin activated a containment shield. The croc slammed into it and bounced off, dazed. "Deploy tranquilizers," Veluin ordered. A pair of drones zipped in and fired darts into the creature's flank. Moments later, it slumped to the floor. Preston leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "You retrieved that from the Arctic?" he asked. Veluin nodded. "We believed it had perished upon freezing. We underestimated its resilience." Preston wiped sweat from his forehead. "Clearly." Brala stepped forward. "You should not have followed. You are still recovering." "Yeah. Well, I wanted to make sure no one else got turned into lunch." Veluin regarded him for a long moment. "Your species continues to defy our thermal models." "We've got a saying," Preston said, wincing as he stood upright. "What doesn't kill us makes us stronger." Brala looked puzzled. "But many things do, in fact, kill you." "Well, yeah," Preston chuckled. "But we keep trying anyway." They guided him back to the med bay, this time without protest. He was subjected to another round of scans, and Veluin insisted on a full imaging of his chest. The results came back an hour later. "You have 2 fractured ribs," Veluin said. Preston nodded. "Figured as much. You require immobilization and rest. Estimated recovery duration, 6 to 8 weeks. Sounds about right." Veluin hesitated. "We wish to conduct a controlled observation of your species' use of ice water. For science." Preston raised an eyebrow. "You want me to take another ice bath?" Brala interjected. "No. We wish to observe others. Volunteers. That'll be a hard sell. We will offer incentives." Preston laughed, then winced. "You better offer a lot of hot chocolate." Veluin tapped a console. "We will begin preparations. Your assistance in coordinating with your species will be valuable." Preston leaned back on the platform. "Just don't try to freeze anyone else solid, okay?" Veluin's eyes blinked sideways. "Understood." As the aliens busied themselves with their strange instruments, Preston closed his eyes, the chill still lingering under his skin. Cold had nearly killed him, but now it had bridged the gap between worlds. He grinned to himself. Ice water. Who knew it would be the thing that got aliens to take humans seriously? The Varellan infirmary had no clocks, but Preston could feel time dragging. The walls hummed with a low rhythmic pulse, and the ambient light shifted gradually between blue and violet, which apparently imitated their concept of afternoon. His ribs throbbed with every breath, and the thin, skin-tight wrap they'd applied constricted just enough to remind him of the damage. No painkillers. The Varellans were still trying to understand how to dose him without shutting down his liver. Brala returned with a small tray containing what looked like steamed kelp and a cup of thick, amber-colored liquid. Nutrition supplement, she said, setting it beside him. Digestive compatibility has been confirmed. He eyed the cup. Is this going to make me hallucinate? Unlikely. It contains proteins, electrolytes, and mild sedatives. I'll take 2. Brala didn't respond to the joke. She stood near the platform, fingers folded behind her back, watching him too intently. You don't blink when you stare, Preston said. We don't require it. He took a cautious sip. It was bitter but not unpleasant. Like if mushroom broth had a cousin that did yoga and read philosophy books. You demonstrated high predictive behavior during the containment failure, Brala said. You anticipated the creature's movements with limited sensory data. I've seen one of those things before, he replied. Zoo in Darwin. Watched it for 20 minutes. Barely moved until someone dropped a sandwich. Then it lunged like it had been planning for hours. You don't forget that. We assumed your response was instinctive. Preston leaned his head back. Instinct might get you to jump out of the way once. Pattern recognition keeps you from getting bitten twice. Brala tapped something into a tablet. Your species stores threat behavior patterns after brief exposure? If we're paying attention. Fascinating. Do you do this for all fauna? Only the ones that can kill us. She looked up again. That is a large category. Preston raised the cup in mock salute. Welcome to Earth. Brala didn't laugh, but the corners of her mouth twitched in what might have been her version of amusement. Veluin entered carrying a small, translucent case. Inside, a pale, gelatinous mass pulsed gently. This is the neural substrate, Veluin said. We extracted it from subject 34B post-tranquilization. It continues to emit low-frequency signals. You've got its brain in a Tupperware. Brala turned to Veluin. He named your containment vessel. Noted. Veluin set the case on a nearby console and turned to Preston. We have received confirmation from the Council. A delegation of observers will arrive within 72 planetary rotations. They wish to witness human resilience demonstrations firsthand. Preston blinked. You're organizing an alien field trip to watch people do. What? Jump into freezing lakes. Among other trials. Why? Veluin studied him. Your species displays anomalous responses to environmental stressors. The Council believes these traits may be adaptive, not incidental. Wait, you think we evolved to survive being cold and wet? Your species evolved in a high variability climate. Your capacity to endure thermal shifts, oxygen deprivation, and physical trauma is disproportionate to your ecological niche. Brala added, there is also interest in your psychological thresholds. Your species appears to engage in self-induced hardship with no immediate survival incentive. Preston set down the cup. You mean hobbies? Recreational strain, Veluin corrected. So, what, you want to film a Tough Mudder race? Brala consulted her tablet. We are constructing aquatic immersion simulators and endurance test environments. We are currently reviewing your planetary sources for volunteers. Preston frowned. You're not grabbing random people, are you? Negative. We have issued open invitations via encrypted transmissions. Responses have already begun. He swung his legs over the edge of the platform. I should probably look at those. Make sure you're not inviting conspiracy theorists who think you're here to steal their skin. Veluin narrowed his eyes. That is not a belief we encountered. You will. Brala handed him a small projection disc. This contains profiles of the first respondents. Preston activated it and a series of faces hovered above the device. One was a woman in her 50s wearing a parka and standing knee-deep in snow with a grin that said she hadn't felt toes in hours. Another was a young guy submerged in an ice barrel up to his neck, eyes closed in meditative bliss. Okay, that one's legit, Preston said, pointing. He's a cold therapy advocate. Talks about breathing techniques and mental focus. The lady, Probably Canadian, which means she's fine. Veluin tapped the side of the case. We require at least 5 candidates for the initial demonstration, preferably with varied thermal tolerance profiles. Don't bring in extreme outliers, Preston said. You'll get skewed data. You want people who do this now and then, not the guy who lives in a cave and thinks ice is a spiritual entity. Brala paused, then said one respondent submitted footage of himself screaming into a snowbank while shirtless. Yeah, not that guy. Veluin looked up. We will refine the selection criteria. Later, Brala returned with a tray holding a small device the size of a coin. This is a temporary nerve dampener, she said. It will reduce discomfort in your thoracic region without altering brain chemistry. Preston took it and pressed it just below his clavicle. A tingle radiated outward, and the sharp edge of pain dulled. I know you don't have to blink, but do you sleep? During stasis intervals. How long is that? 8 planetary rotations. Okay, so, not tonight. She sat on a stool beside the platform. Your cardiovascular readings have stabilized. You may begin light movement as tolerated. Good, Preston said, sliding carefully to his feet. Because lying here listening to your climate control hum has made me question the concept of time. They walked slowly through the corridor, Brala matching his pace without comment. The lights dimmed overhead, signaling some kind of rest phase. How do you decide what to study? Preston asked. Why humans now? We monitor planetary broadcasts for anomalies. Your species began displaying coordinated resilience behaviors across multiple environments. Cold exposure, high-altitude dwelling, long-duration fasting. Voluntary hardship became widespread over a short interval. You track TikTok. Unknown term. Never mind. They entered a chamber where clear panels displayed Earth landscapes. One showed a frozen lake dotted with swimmers. Another showed a marathon in a desert. You think we're evolving? Veluin's voice came from a speaker above. We believe your species is performing unconscious adaptation experiments on itself. Brala added, you test limits not only of the body but of social cohesion and belief structures. Then you share the results. Preston stared at the images. Most of us don't think about it like that. That is why it fascinates us. Preston drew a breath. You said they're coming in 72 rotations? Correct. Then we've got work to do. Brala tilted her head. You will assist? If you're going to tell the galaxy we're built to survive the impossible, I'd like to help you not screw it up. Veluin's voice came again. Then you will lead the demonstration. Preston turned toward the speaker. You want me to be the example? You endured freezing submersion, recovered without medical intervention, and engaged a hostile predator while injured. I also fell through a lake because I didn't check the ice thickness. That detail will be omitted. Preston rubbed his eyes. Fine, but I'm not doing it alone. If you want a proper sample, I'll help you organize it. We'll need a protocol, safety measures, warming stations, agreed. And real coffee. We will investigate. As they walked back toward the infirmary, Preston felt a strange sense of momentum forming. The aliens hadn't just abducted him. They'd handed him a stage. Somewhere, in a quiet part of space where beings spoke in frequencies and blinked sideways, they were preparing to watch humanity strip down and dive into frozen lakes for science. And for once, Preston wasn't the weirdest one in the room. By dawn cycle, Veluin had converted one of the ship's auxiliary hangars into a makeshift climate chamber. Preston stood at the threshold, arms crossed, watching the final adjustments. The walls shimmered with active thermal fields and embedded sensors blinked in steady rhythm. A shallow pool had been constructed at the center, fed by pipes that hissed as supercooled liquid flowed in. Hovering above it, a monitor displayed real-time temperature, -1 Celsius. A tall Varellan technician approached with a folded jumpsuit in translucent fabric. Thermal neutral attire. Minimal interference with biometric readings. Preston took it. You know, on Earth, we usually just wear trunks. The technician blinked, then drifted away without comment. Preston changed behind a privacy screen, the suit clinging oddly to his skin, like a second layer of cold air made visible. Brala entered shortly after, carrying a small case of instruments. Your vitals are within acceptable range. If discomfort exceeds tolerable thresholds, signal immediately. I'll try not to scream unless something falls off. She didn't laugh, which he was getting used to. Instead, she activated a small interface and began calibrating the chamber's output. It's weird to be the guy explaining this, Preston said. You initiated the cascade of interest. The Council's priority is to understand the motivation behind your species' voluntary exposure to environmental extremes. He glanced at the pool. You ever gone in water that cold? No. My species lacks the physiological capacity. Then you're gonna love this. The door hissed open again, and Veluin entered, followed by 3 other Varellans wearing layered sashes denoting rank. Observers. One of them held a spectral recorder shaped like an angular prism, which hovered and adjusted its angle automatically. Preston stepped up to the platform beside the pool. You sure the floor isn't going to freeze through? The surface is embedded with micro-resistors, Veluin said. Localized heat distribution will prevent crystallization. Good. I'd prefer not to glue myself to the tiles. He took a deep breath and lowered himself into the water. The cold hit like a slap from inside his lungs. He clenched his jaw, forcing his breath into slow, even exhales. The suit thinned to allow direct water contact, and he could feel every nerve ending flare in protest. The water came up to his shoulders. He sat cross-legged at the bottom of the shallow basin, arms resting on his knees. The room was silent except for the gentle churn of circulating fluid. Brala flicked her eyes to the monitor. Core temperature dropping. Heart rate elevated but stable. Preston closed his eyes. Just give it a minute. After 30 seconds, the burning sensation dulled. His skin felt numb, but his breathing had evened out. He focused on the rhythm of his inhale and exhale, just like he'd practiced during training drills for mountain search and rescue. Stay calm. Keep your oxygen steady. Don't let the cold own the narrative. One of the observers leaned toward Veluin. This is not a survival scenario. He entered willingly. Yes, it is a demonstration of control. The observer made a note in a suspended data field. And the pain, managed through self-regulation. Another observer turned to Brala. Does the subject experience euphoria? Preston opened one eye. Not unless you're into masochism. Brala approached the pool. How would you describe your current state? Focused. Discomfort's still there, but it's background noise now. Duration so far, 3 minutes, Veluin announced. Preston looked up. I can stay longer. We have sufficient data, Brala said. But not enough for the Council. You'll need this to be repeatable, right? That is correct. Then let me stay until the 5-minute mark. That's the cutoff most cold exposure therapists recommend. Veluin exchanged a glance with the observers but nodded. Continue. The minutes stretched. The initial pain had faded, replaced by a strange clarity. His thoughts sharpened, stripped of distraction. He could hear the hum of the coolant pumps, the faint whisper of Varellan's speech, even the sound of his own blood in his ears. At exactly 5 minutes, Brala tapped a control panel. Time complete. Begin thermal reintroduction. The floor beneath the basin warmed incrementally. Preston stood, water cascading off the suit. A warm mist enveloped him as the chamber initiated its recovery sequence. He stepped onto a dry platform, trembling but upright. Brala handed him a nutrient packet with electrolytes and mild sugars. He drank it in one long pull. Neuromuscular function appears preserved, she said, scanning his legs with a diagnostic ring. No signs of vasoconstrictive damage. I'm good, he said, voice still choppy. No pins and needles. Toes are responsive. Veluin turned to the observers. This concludes the initial demonstration. We will now begin secondary protocols with additional subjects. The observers departed without ceremony, the prism recorder trailing them silently. Brala escorted Preston back to the preparation chamber. He toweled off and changed into dry clothes while she examined the data tablet. You exceeded the projected tolerance curve. Humans can take a lot more than people think. We are beginning to understand. Our next volunteers arrive within 2 Earth days. Preston sat on the edge of the bench. You have a plan for them? Each will undergo preliminary screening. No test will proceed without explicit consent and post-exposure care. Good. Keep warm zones within direct access. Core drops below 35 Celsius, you pull them immediately. Brala nodded. Understood. A short tone rang through the corridor. Veluin's voice followed. Debrief in auxiliary conference chamber in 30 minutes. Brala turned to Preston. You may attend or rest. I'll come. Better to know how they took it. He dressed quickly and followed her through the winding halls. The conference chamber was a low-lit room with a curved table and embedded projection fields. Veluin and the observers were already seated. One of them gestured toward Preston. You were lucid upon exit. This is consistent with your species' reported high cold resilience. Preston Saturday, it's not just genetics. It's culture. People train for this. They build tolerance. It's not about being superhuman, it's about being willing. Veluin tapped the interface. We have compiled a comparative chart of known species. Human cold endurance is currently unmatched among non-aquatic, non-hibernating organisms. One observer leaned forward. What purpose does it serve? There is no environmental pressure forcing this adaptation. Preston paused. It's about choice. We seek out discomfort to test the limits. Maybe to prove something to ourselves. Or maybe because we don't like being told what we can't survive. Silence followed. Then the observer stood. We will recommend continued observation. Your input will remain vital. They departed in sequence, each disappearing silently through the door. Veluin looked at Preston. You have altered the council's assumptions. I just sat in cold water. No. You did so without necessity. That is what they cannot explain. Brala turned off the interface. Further tests will proceed with volunteers. Your role is advisory now. Preston exhaled. Good. My ribs still hate me. Brala offered a data tag. This grants access to the volunteer wing. You may review protocols at your leisure. He pocketed it. I'll stop by after some sleep. Veluin gestured toward the corridor. A rest chamber has been prepared. Temperature, 22 Celsius. Humidity, 40%. Ambient lighting, adjustable. Sounds like a 5-star igloo. They left him at the chamber door. Inside, the room was quiet, warm, and mercifully free of blinking monitors. He lay on the bed, the memory of icy water still tingling in his limbs. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a soldier. But somehow, by doing something half the planet wouldn't consider unusual, he'd helped rewrite an entire species' understanding of human capability. He pulled the thermal blanket over himself and closed his eyes. For the first time in days, he slept without shivering.